today free. Free meaning that they are fully alive. They love the woman they're becoming, because in the Western world, we have arrived at a level of freedom where we can vote, we can work, we can own properties. And I think that we have seen really the gift of the feminist movement, and that their rebelliousness yield and gave us, the opportunity to become who God created us to be in the marketplace. Because I think prior to that, maybe women were called to be doctors or nurses, or perhaps be even an influence in society, but they were hindered because the laws itself hindered women to become fully who perhaps God created them to be. Now, it's important to also note that, so many women today also discredit the feminist rebellion, which we have to just give credit where credit is due. And the reality is that the feminist, if it was not for the feminist movement, then we would not attain the freedom that we currently have, I think, in the Western world. And I do think that what they did was give us our God-given freedom, the freedom to actually actualize ourselves and maximize our potential. And I always think of the parable of the talents, 1, 5, and 10. And I thought, well, what if women were given 5, 150 years ago, but they couldn't maximize it because the laws inhibited them? And I think that now, there was no excuse for us to say, at least in the Western world, to become who God created us to be. So even though they were wounded women, and even though that it was an imperfect movement, that they were able to yield a gift, which is to give us our God-given freedom. And I don't think we should discredit them or perhaps almost mock them. I think that we should honor and give credit where credit is due. Number two, I also think it's important to point out that the feminist movement, those that have fought for our freedom right now, were also so wounded. If you look at the history, I'm reading Dr. Kara Grace's book on the death of women. If you look at actually the history of, Margaret Sanger and I would say the early feminist movement who gave us the right to vote, if you look at their friendship, their relationship with their father, their mother, their family life, their wealth, and the different parts of their wholeness arena, which is what we speak about in the women's school, you can see that how broken they are. And I think it shows also that in our brokenness, there's so much mercy and there's so much grace that even in our brokenness, we can bring forth something so good. And I just think that's important to point out, because I don't believe in discrediting them. I don't believe also in shaming them and perhaps just robbing them of also their value as women, because we don't know the whole story. We don't know what they've had to endure. We don't know the pain that they have endured as women that allowed them to actually fight for women's right. Now, we also have to see things for what it is, meaning that they were flawed human beings. When I look at, what Margaret Sanger, what her goal was really, she wanted to eradicate, the African American babies. And so I think what should be our perception here as mature women who can see both the good and the bad, and also harvest the good from all that. And what we should see is, what can we learn from the women who have fought for our freedom in the marketplace? What can we harvest from them so that we can carry on and grow as a society to move forward into a deeper layer of freedom? That I think what we are moving towards. I believe that the new feminist movement that's coming from these ashes, where we are now seeing the backlash of women trying to be men or women eradicating men. Now men are pushing back. Now women are unhappy with who they are. Data tells us that women are not happier than they, were when they didn't, perhaps have the same level of freedom in the marketplace. I see that it hasn't changed. And so this new movement towards, I would say the new feminism, I think, is towards interior freedom. Because having freedom does not mean that we are free. And what we need to understand is that in the Western world, women are free. They can do whatever they want for the most part, right? Even though, women will say equal pay, or perhaps we don't have, rights in the same places. There's not equal CEOs. I mean, there's an argument for that, but that's not really the point. The point is that we ought to be fulfilled women, because that is ultimately our universal desire as women, is that to be fully alive, to feel as though our lives feel alive. And I think that having freedom has not equaled fulfillment. And so therefore the question is, what makes a woman fulfilled, meaning fully alive? And I think that's the next wave of feminism that I believe is brewing, because what we are seeing now are women that have hardened hearts, women that are no longer see the value of their worth, women who no longer want to see, marriage as a commitment, or have negated their own desire for motherhood for fear of whatever has been, propaganda or false advertisement that they've come to understand about motherhood. And what we are seeing, our women are unfulfilled. They're not happier because having less children, or they're not married. I think they're unhappier. So how do we then move forward as a society in the Western world to give women this idea of interior freedom? Well, first, I don't think that we can be fully free until we understand who we are uniquely as a woman, because we can never be free trying to be a man. We can never be fully free trying to be somebody that we were not created to be. So I think the first thing we need to, I would say, kind of cut off, or perhaps bring clarity towards, is that, what if feminism was about becoming fully who we are and not trying to become a man? I because I think the feminist movement has now been equated to men bashing and ridiculing men, and men are pushing back. I am seeing an uprising of men right now because of all this backlash. And I think the trend now that we are seeing is that men are actually growing more conservative and women are becoming more sort of liberal socially. And I think because men are tired of actually feeling as though they are weak or being devalued. And this is a reason why Andrew Tate has, is the number one most Googled men in the internet, not necessarily because he's teaching all these great things. I think that Andrew Tate in some degree is not actually living the fullness of masculinity, although I cannot judge the heart of man. And I think that we have to give credit where credit is due. And he is empowering men to be stronger than they were, to not be weakened by what society tells you. So I do think that we need to honor that part of him. He's imperfect, just like we all are. But what the point I'm saying is that men want to be men. Men no longer want to be susceptible to this weak idea of manhood, where they can't stand up for themselves, where they allow men to bash them, or they're so incapable of actually levels and layers of discipline because they've been so weakened or have become a victim to this emasculization. So there is a rise of men wanting to be men. As a byproduct of that, I also think that there's a rise of women wanting to be women. I think that we're sort of, in some degree, just kind of awakening to the reality that now we are being erased. I mean, you can't go, open the internet without seeing all the transgender movement, all, women in sports, or perhaps women in men's bathroom, and vice versa. I mean, the confusion right now that we are allowing for our children, where there's no sacredness of what it means to be a woman, is a real tragedy, because the fact is that you can't erase women. Why? Because it's God-given. By erasing women, I think you embolden the hearts of women to defend their value. What I don't understand are some of the women that are, fighting for our right to be women, are also the ones that are actually suppressing us. And I think a lot of them are actually don't believe it deep down inside. I think they're just sort of allowing this cultural narrative for fear of being canceled because of the suppression that comes with speaking up against it. I think that women, are not okay with the men in, the arena of sports. I think women want their privacy. I think women don't want to be erased. I don't think women, as a silent majority, wants to have a man as a winner of a pageant, or, women of the year that's biological male. The idea that there's all these different genders, that there's no longer the sacredness of both male and female, has completely turned in itself, because what we are seeing is it has become so irrational. It has become so, I would just say, it's madness. So there's words, where you're looking at it and you're like, what? We can identify as a cat, you can identify as a horse, and the men can be women and women can be lesbians. I mean, it was just so confusing that it's even hard to articulate and explain that we are seeing this madness turn in itself. And I think that women are waking up to the fact that, I might not have a language for it, but I'm not okay with it. I'm not okay with being erased. I'm not okay with my children being in the same bathroom as a man. I'm not okay with my children not being able to compete fairly. And I think what we are moving towards is almost a reawakening of the reverence of our sexuality, our God-given sexuality. Whether you have faith in God or not, the reality is that we are biologically born a man and a woman. And you can argue, right, the intersex, but I think it really is a hard argument. And if you see the arguments out there, you can't argue. You can't argue with the fact that truth it trumps our feelings, and that you can't just castrate a child just because they feel like a man one day. I was a tomboy growing up and I refused to wear a dress for years. I remember crying in tears because I just did not want to wear a dress. Thank God that I was not born at this time in history where I would probably be castrated, but worse, they would have put my parents in jail if my parents decided that I or resisted maybe my feelings of feeling like, a woman. I mean, it's insanity, because I had a son who's beautiful and amazing, who thought he was a monkey for 3 months and who walked with his legs. So what I'm seeing right now is an awakening in the hearts of women and saying, you know what, I don't think I'm okay with this. I just don't know what I'm going to do about it. Part of it is that we have been so stripped of our own voices because of fear of what people think. And I think there's a shock element of this, a shock in the fact that how did we really get here so fast that we have a Supreme Court judge that cannot define what a woman is. I mean, that's scary that we have somebody at the highest office that is unwilling to take a stand against this propaganda that we cannot say that we are either born a man and a woman. Our culture has become so upside down that I think truth will be so attractive to so many. So what am I saying to you? I'm saying to you, I think this is a time of reawakening of the sacredness of what it means to be a woman. I think this is time to reawaken our ability to revere men and the fullness of who God created them to be. I think this is a time to bring back family values and friendship and honor intimacy with both a man and a woman. When you have Gen Z, 1 out of 4 no longer believes in marriage, the foundation of the infrastructure of society, which is family. And now we no longer see the sacredness also of married life. So I think there is a call for such a time as this, a call of renewal in our own hearts as women to say, you know what is my responsibility for such a time as this, where there's no longer truth as the bedrock of our society? How can I make my marriage more beautiful? How can I make being a woman being beautiful? How can I revere our men and honor them? How can I have friendships that truly are meaningful and not steep in comparison and competition? How can I make my family also so attractive so that people don't see family life as something to be feared, rather as something to be revered? The basic infrastructure of culture. We have to make family life beautiful. And I know that does not sound easy, right? I think that the discipline that is required for a woman to take care of both her household, but also contribute outside of her home, if we are called to, requires deep interior life. It requires discipline after discipline after discipline. It requires deep responsibility. It requires accountability. It requires a lot of constant humility for us to know that we have got to actually rise up and mature who we ought to become in our mindset and our skill set. But I do think the alternative is worse. I do think that if we do not train ourselves to bring reverence back to what it means to be a mother, to be human, to bring family, to bring life, where we can now tolerate this idea of birthing parent and no longer the sacredness of motherhood. I mean, we don't have a choice. Because if we don't fight back and if we don't speak up, then we are part of the problem. Evil grows when good men and women are asleep in the wheel. That's sort of a quote from, I think it's Cardinal Burke. And, evil grows when good men stay silent. But what I'm saying to you is that I think the problem with our culture is that our hearts have been so lukewarmed. And when I say lukewarm, I mean that we have become comfortable just trying to do our deed of raising our family. And in some ways that is noble, right? The idea that we are here to raise our children, make sure we protect our children and do the best that we can as mothers and as fathers, I think is a noble thing. But I do think that we are at a time of war. There's spiritual warfare happening in our culture. And I think that when there's a war that's happening around you, we need everyone on deck, and we can't just sort of sit back and say, you know what, I just want to take care of my family, because eventually when we're just all taking care of our family, yes, it's noble, but eventually the war is in our doorstep, because evil grows when we stay silent, when we do nothing outside of our homes. And I'm not suggesting that we go out there and, armor up. Yes, I am saying armor up spiritually. But what I am saying is that we have to reflect on who we are becoming as women. We have to reflect in our call for such a time as this, to uphold the dignity of women, to uphold the dignity of men, to protect our children from this constant propaganda and pornography and impurity, or the transgender movement, who's robbing our children of the innocence of their childhood and the sacredness of their God-given sexuality. I think if we don't voice out, then who? If not us, then who? If not when, then if not now, then when? I think this is our time. I think we are all called for such a unique time in history, where we have to defend the value of what it means to be a woman. And I think it's a privileged time to be a woman, because what we have right now is data that tells us that the radical feminist movement is not sustainable. It's actually destructive to humanity. And what is actually an invitation is, how can we live a moral life that honors the value of every human person? How can we make that attractive again? How can we make our lives as women so beautiful that it makes their life become a role model to women who might not know their value? How can we make our family life so inviting and not chaotic, that we've, sort of signed up with this idea that, beautiful moms, dirty kitchen, the hot mess mama movement? What if mothers were so disciplined and so trained that we no longer talked about this idea of mommy brain, and that we can hold space for both an orderly kitchen, a beautiful and peaceful home, but also deep respect for ourselves and taking care of ourselves? It also means that we have a voice in the marketplace. It also means that, we don't just sort of let go and lose ourselves. What if motherhood was a place where we gain more of who we are? That we expand our dreams, we expand our desires, we expand our ability to be more responsible and disciplined, because now we're responsible for another human being. So the invitation here that I'm asking you is that I think there's a new movement of women happening. This new woman that's fighting for the interior freedom of women, that we are bringing reverence back to the sacredness of what it means to be a woman, to the original design that God intended humanity to be, which is to flourish, to bask in what is true, good, and beautiful. And the invitation I'm asking you is that, what is your role in this battle? How are you forming yourself, chiseling? Like I say, we are armoring up for the battle. You're training up. You go to, boot camp, and you're training yourself for such a time as this. So you will have the strength to speak up. So you will have the ability to actually sustainably give outside your home, because you're not, steeped in this overwhelm or comparison or competition, that your life is indeed in order as a woman. Now is the time to train harder more than ever. Now is the time to armor up as a woman, to link arms together. And the way we do that is that we value who we are, and we know who we are. And it's not this idea of, whose you are, your gods. No, it's about training. It's about the renewal of our mind. It's about dying to our old self to give birth to our new disciplined self. It's about dying to the cross, dying on the cross every single day, so that we can resurrect into a new version of ourselves, that new woman that is capable of fighting the spiritual warfare that is around us, but also within us. I think it is a privileged time to be a woman, for such a time where we can, and we are called to armor up together, but armor up ourselves, and being entrusted with a call to now bring forth a new level and a new layer of freedom, which is interior freedom, which I truly believe is what God longs for every human heart. If this resonates with you, join our movement in the Women's School, where we teach women how to be a woman, give you the practical tools that you need for such a time as this, to bring reverence back on what it means to be a woman. And share this video. And if you want to join our free course called How to Be a Woman, go to howtobeawomanfreecourse.com It is free. It's a 1 month long course. You get a coach, you get assigned a group, and you get assigned a course that you get to work through. It's a foundation that I truly believe we all need for such a time as this to understand our value as women. So join us. It's free for everyone. Please invite, because I think now is the time for us to bring reverence back what it means to be a woman. You and I were created for such a time as this, and I think it's time to unwrap.